Our story begins with a man who wished for a healthy body if he were ever reborn, because only then would he be able to truly become someone in the end. And in fact, that man really was reincarnated into a perfectly healthy body. He had white hair. Soon after, the scene shifts to a meeting at an academy where many people had gathered. A blonde man wanted those who were fighting to show their true power. The reincarnated man stood beside him, merely observing those battles from the sidelines. He believed that with a strong body combining strength and theory, he could calculate the outcome of battles. In that life, he was finally able to pursue his dreams. While he was fighting, he made a single movement and revealed an energy completely different from before. Some believed it was due to a curse. A girl shouted, begging the reincarnated one, Louis, not to lose to the curse. Even so, not even he understood what he had done. He kept wondering whether, in that life, he would lose to fate. People told him to give up, and even called him a girl, as if they were trying to define his destiny for him. But Louis did not pay much attention to fate. He was determined to shatter that destiny into pieces. Then the scene shifts to a time before all of this happened. It was the year 594 of the Holy Calendar, at an arcane academy called Candria. Louis arrived at the place and found everything incredible. He had expected as much from the Empire's main training school for arcanes, but he could see that there were many candidates there. Louis Carril was a 13-year-old boy when he was called. He looked toward the direction of the voice. A girl wearing a nun's outfit did not want him to leave her behind. A nerdy-looking boy commented that Louis was very fast. The nun soon approached the boy, asking whether he had brought his identification. She also warned him to be careful, since no one could notice the color of his hair. That woman was Louis's mother, and he told her that he had hair dye. Even so, his mother was not happy about him having to do that. She had heard that some candidates died, and she was afraid someone might target him because of his hair color or his eyes. The nerdy boy then reminded Louis's mother that the only way to solve the boy's problem was through magic. His mother's name was Lucilla, and this was the only academy in the entire empire where poor people like Louis could take the entrance exam. Because of that, Candria Academy was also highly regarded for offering such a great opportunity. It was the main institution established by the royal family of Candria, and one of the 10 great academies, a training school for arcanes where the strongest grandmasters of the empire taught. Over the last 10 years, several guardians of non-noble origins had emerged, and most of them had graduated from that academy. Thus, the nerd believed it was the perfect environment for a boy like Louis to learn magic. At that point, Louis told his mother that Julian was right. He truly wanted to become a grand master and grow strong, because he wanted to obtain ownership of the church orphanage. Lucilla was surprised by her son's ambition. She had not imagined that he had become so reliable. She could not heal his anger, and was still making him worry about the institution, which made her think she was a terrible mother because of it. Julian quickly began praising her, saying that she took care of many children and did more than enough. Even so, Louis made it clear that he was alive thanks to his mother, and that he was truly grateful for it. In his past life, he dreamed of becoming the greatest fighter in the world, but he had been born with severe asthma and lived dependent on a respirator. Even his parents had scolded him for being a money drain. Despite that condition, he never stopped loving martial arts. He constantly researched them, and that passion eventually bore fruit. He became an academic, researching martial arts theory. His research greatly contributed to the development of the combat industry and the renaissance of martial arts. However, a certain academic stole his thesis, accused him of being a thief, and portrayed the victim as the villain. In the end, that man stole his glory. He was even abandoned by his parents. He wanted to live longer, which was why he wished for a healthy body in his next life. He also wanted a family that loved him. He wanted a life of his own. Thus, in the year 90 of the Holy Calendar, in the northern Candea Empire, in the city of Mantia, Lucilla found a boy. She wanted to take the child with her, but others said it was a bad idea because of his hair color. In the end, the reincarnated one did not understand what was happening. He had just woken up and could not comprehend it, because he should have been dead. Lucilla held the reincarnated child, while hearing others say that the boy could bring disaster to the institution. She thought differently. She knew the child was innocent and could not abandon him. It was there that she gave the reincarnated boy the name Louis Carril. That was how he came to have a precious family that loved him. The nerdy Julian was his father. Louis Carril also had a healthy body. Suddenly, in the present, just as he was about to take the exam to enter Cadrian Academy, someone shoved his mother and called her a commoner. Lucilla fell hard to the ground, like a ripe fruit dropping from a tree. It was a group of bullies, making it clear that for a commoner to become a grand master was an impossible dream. Louis immediately stared at them with a demonic gaze. One of the men continued to mock the family, acting arrogant and ironic, feeling disgusted for having touched a filthy commoner, yet hoping his luck would not run out because of it. Hearing all that nonsense, Louis hunched over, like a crouching beast, trembling with the rage he felt at that moment. But before he could do something foolish and ruin his day, his father grabbed his arm, making it clear that he should focus on the exam. Julian was not wrong. Lucilla reminded him that he had promised not to cause trouble at the academy, and that he should keep that promise. Louis then sighed and apologized to his mother. The men thought Julian was a killjoy, mocked Louis for needing luck for anything, and finally left. Soon after, Louis and his family heard people telling them to clear the way, because Lord Cain was passing by. Some people were quite surprised to see a noble up close. Cain was one of those boys born with everything handed to him: blonde hair, blue eyes, and pockets full of money. He was so rich rich that he practically shone. He was the damned heir of the Aranka family. Louis merely pondered in his mind what he could do about nobles. Laciela noticed that her son had a devilish expression on his face, and immediately grew worried. However, Louis tried to reassure her, saying that everything was fine. He was also confident that he would pass the test, telling his mother that he would definitely become a Grand Master. His words caught Kane's attention. He promised his mother that he would also learn magic. The nobles looked at that family with disdain. In the end, Louis wanted to become the strongest in that life, and he also wanted to protect what was precious to him. Laciela was worried about the boy's well-being. Julian tried to comfort her, but she was still anxious, because only 20 to 30 people passed each year, and that year there were 20,000 candidates. All she wanted was Louis's safety. Julian believed that Louis was more stubborn than anyone else. Once he set his mind on something, he would pursue it without caring about what others thought. Still, as his family, they had to support him. Laciela did not disagree. Soon after, Louis arrived at the examination hall, where he saw a crowd of people much older than him. At that moment, there was a mage floating in the air. It was the 160th entrance exam of the Candria Arcane Academy. The man introduced himself as the chief supervisor of the academy's examination. His name was Aronian Smith, the director of the Candria Arcane Academy. Some people were surprised to see the Grand Master Director Aronian in person. Louis grew thoughtful. In that world, there were martial arcanists, practitioners of arcane martial arts, and they were divided into 6 levels: apprentice, fighter, master, Grand Master, sage, and Grand Sage Master. The Grand Master ranked 3rd from the top. In other words, a privileged class. Aronian then announced that the first test was to climb the stairs guarded by the Academy's veterans. The exam passes were placed behind the veterans. There were 1,000 passes in total, and only those who obtained one would proceed to the next test. Once all the passes were taken, the exam would end. After the announcement, Aronian declared that the test was starting at that very moment. Thus, a terrible frenzy began. Many candidates rushed toward the veterans, thinking it would be easy. However, one of the veterans simply smiled and began to release his power, welcoming the candidates and telling them that they were heading straight to hell. Suddenly, many candidates were affected. Several began to foam at the mouth, showing that it was far from easy. Many were disqualified all at once. Other candidates were terrified by the completely bizarre attack. That veteran was already known by some. It was a man named Sheath, the son of the Minister of Finance. Louis felt a killing intent coming from Sheath, which made the other candidates wary of Louis as well. The silver-haired boy walked past everyone, stating that it had not been an attack at all. He explained that Sheath had merely released his aura to intimidate the candidates, and that anyone who fainted from fear was nothing more than a weakling with no real will to win. Louis's eyes burned with fury. Sheath did not disagree with Louis, thinking that the boy was not so bad after all. Still, he made it clear that there were many talented people there, and there was no room for commoners. With that, Sheath made a point of showing his aura again to intimidate the poor candidates. Many began to feel sick, saying they could not breathe. Some even drooled. Louis felt nothing. He was not that pathetic. He merely observed the strange crowd. Louis wondered if that was all the killing intent Sheath had. To him, it was only enough to terrify ordinary people. Someone well-trained like Louis was completely different. He recalled the times he had fought various creatures and smiled, knowing that Sheath's failed trick would not work on him. Then he charged straight at the veteran, determined to show the nobles what true killing intent was. The boy's recklessness shocked everyone. Sheath was caught off guard as Louis's fist came dangerously close to him. Sheath could not hide that he was somewhat frightened. Murmurs spread through the crowd. It was not every day that they saw a 13-year-old boy withstand a veteran's killing intent, and even threatened to punch him, all without using magic. Louis then told the veteran, who fell silent for a moment, that he would pass. He quickly grabbed one of the passes. Sheath turned sour with rage, and cowardly rushed toward Louis. But Louis was no fool. He defended himself immediately. Sheath found it impossible that a mere commoner could block his attack. At that moment, Aronian appeared out of nowhere, placing a hand on Sheath's shoulder and making it clear that Louis had passed the first exam. The foolish veteran refused to accept it, simply because Louis was a commoner. Aronian, however, had a different perspective. He clarified that Candria Academy treated all candidates equally. It did not matter whether one was a commoner or a noble. They were all human. Both Louis and Sheath acknowledged that the director was absolutely right, and Louis thanked him. Aronian congratulated Louis, but he had also noticed Louis's hair color, finding it quite concerning. Director Aronian also noticed Louis's eyes. Louis pretended not to understand, asking what the director meant by that. Aronian then placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered that, if Louis were approved, he would prepare a special magic potion to conceal Louis's unique traits. A potion meant for special people. The silver-haired boy had no idea what the director was planning, but he wanted to pass the exam no matter what, so he decided to prepare himself for the second test. He then turned his back on the director, while Sheath stared at him with a furious expression. Sheath realized that this was the first time the director had ever intervened during an exam, and he wanted to understand why the director was protecting a mere commoner. In the end, he declared that he would remember Louis's name. The scene then shifted to the Candria Arcane Academy's training field, where everyone was informed that the second exam would begin soon. Out of the 20,000 candidates, only 1,000 remained. Most were nobles who had received elite education. Almost no commoners were left. At that point, the noble who had knocked down the silver-haired boy's mother passed by him, bumping his shoulder and making it clear that no one would help him next time, calling Louis a poor wretch. The man looked offended, showing how weak-minded and petty he was. Louis merely observed him, while another arrogant noble pointed a finger at his face, making it clear that if the director had not helped him, he would have already been disqualified. Louis found that whole bunch of weaklings quite amusing. Naturally, the little noble did not like being talked back to. Louis reminded those nobles that a grand master possessed far better judgment than they ever would. The noble immediately asked whether Louis was looking for a punch. Louis merely smirked, which deeply irritated him. Enraged, the noble threw a punch at Louis's face, as if he could knock out the silver-haired boy. Louis, reckless as ever, simply raised 2 fingers and stopped the punch cold, causing a shock to ripple between them. At that moment, the noble's body could no longer move, and fear overtook him. Louis had used a meridian-severing technique, his spiral point strike. In the next instant, the noble was sent flying, leaving his companions staring in disbelief. He flew several meters and crashed to the ground like a falling jackfruit. The impact drew the attention of other candidates. The shaken noble tried to stand but struggled violently, his body trembling, while one of his companions rushed over in concern. Still in shock, the noble cried out that he could not feel his arm. It was shaking uncontrollably. He could barely move it at all. He immediately accused Louis of using poison and demanded to report him. Louis calmly explained to the fool that it was neither poison nor anything of the sort. It was martial arts. He had held back because his mother had asked him to, but his patience had limits. In his view, the only people who had the right to strike others were those prepared to be struck in return. Before he could beat that piece of human trash to a pulp, Cain appeared. He grabbed Louis's arm and made it clear that they were in the middle of the exam. He asked whether Louis was all right, and warned that further trouble could lead to disqualification. Only then did the silver-haired boy come to his senses. He turned his back on everyone as the nobles continued to hurl insults, mocking him by saying that the blonde male had come to protect them. The females. Cain demanded to know whether those useless nobles even knew who he was, ordering them to back off immediately. The cowards grew fearful and quickly retreated. The noble who had been lightly beaten by Louis seethed, thinking that both commoners and nobles were worthless trash. He swore he would never forget what had happened. From afar, Louis observed how nobles abused their status to do whatever they pleased. In his eyes, nobles were all the same. Cain then approached the silver-haired boy and confirmed his name was indeed Louis, praising him as strong and courageous. Cain was a different kind of noble. He wanted to combine forces with Louis. 2 girls who had taken a liking to the handsome noble grew excited when they heard he was forming a team. Suddenly, Cain was swarmed by people. Everyone wanted to join him. He was quickly surrounded while Louis merely watched the miserable spectacle. Some candidates believed that teaming up with Cain guaranteed a pass, but Louis did not trust such thinking, and he did not trust Cain either. Suddenly, a blinding light appeared in the second testing ground. The director himself materialized without warning. He congratulated those who had passed the test of will and announced that the next stage would be a test of power. A mark appeared on every candidate, leaving them confused. Cain speculated that it was related to the earth attribute. Moments later, his body began to tremble, feeling unbearably heavy, but he was not the only one. Some candidates were already down on their knees. Director Aronian explained that for the second exam, all candidates would fight on the stage under the influence of earth magic. Some were practically panicking at the overwhelming power of the spell. They could not imagine how they were supposed to fight under such conditions. Suddenly, one candidate pointed toward Louis, shouting in disbelief that the silver-haired boy was walking as if nothing was happening. Cain was still standing as well. Cain's eyes widened at the sight. Louis felt such immense pressure from the magic that his footsteps left deep impressions in the ground as he walked. Despite that, he calmly stepped onto the stage. Aronian noticed that Louis was once again the first to arrive. Everyone remembered that he had also been the first to pass the initial test. Watching Louis, Cain realized just how intense the pressure truly was. In the end, Cain could only think that Louis was a monster. He himself had undergone 3 years of master-level training, yet even standing was difficult. The other candidates could not understand how Louis was managing this. Aronian announced that only those still standing could participate in the next phase. He then cast another spell, directing it toward a collection of weapons. He made it clear that the participants could choose any weapon they wished. Louis quickly picked up a sword. Aronian explained that anyone who left the stage would be disqualified. The candidates were trembling, just trying to hold their weapons. With that, Aronian declared the start of the second exam. He snapped his fingers and ordered the bound slimes to be released. Then he vanished as quickly as he had appeared. As for the slimes, the candidates had no idea what he meant. Louis, being more perceptive, was already looking upward. He saw slimes falling from above. Suddenly, one of them slammed into the ground like a ripe fruit. Only then did the candidates understand what Aronian had meant. They were informed that blocking a slime's attack earned 1 point, dodging earned 2 points, and defeating one earned 5 points. In the end, their rankings would be based on total points, and only the top 100 would advance to the third test, shrinking their chances even further. Louis pondered the fact that only 100 would pass as slimes began bouncing around like popcorn. popcorn. At first, the candidates thought the slimes were dumb and easy prey. Confident, they rushed to attack, eager to earn 5 points. One candidate charged at a slime, but the creature was not so foolish. It lunged first, leaving the man terrified. The slime struck him so hard in the face that several of his teeth were knocked out. He was not the only one caught off guard. Those who had underestimated the slimes quickly realized their mistake. Seeing others get injured, the remaining candidates grew fearful. Then more slimes began to fall, throwing the entire group into panic. Candidates started dropping one by one. Meanwhile, the director's subordinates supervised the test and recorded each candidate's points. One supervisor informed Director Aronian that this year's exam included young masters from the wise families, the Aranka and Durahan houses, making it possible to set a new record. Another supervisor noted that there were many candidates that year, including commoners, and mentioned the poor boy who had passed first in the initial test. Aronian replied that he found Louis interesting and believed something fascinating might come from him. However, one supervisor pointed out a problem. After picking up his sword, Louis had not moved at all. He remained completely still while many candidates were being humiliated by a group of weak blue slimes. Some candidates could not understand why Louis was standing there doing nothing. Given how fast the slimes were, they assumed he simply could not keep up. After all, a commoner was still just a commoner, or so they thought. They believed he would be taken down eventually. Just then, a slime leapt straight toward him. Even with the slime right in front of him, Louis did not move at all. Then at the very last moment, he shifted his neck like a turtle, pulling back into its shell, leaving just enough space for the slime to pass straight by. Several candidates were left stunned. Moments later, the archer was struck head-on. One candidate could not believe that Louis had managed to dodge. It was a last-second evasion. The slimes continued bouncing in every direction. Louis carefully observed everything. Soon, 3 slimes rushed toward him. One particularly foolish candidate was practically rooting for Louis to get hit, convinced that this time the silver-haired boy would not be able to dodge. He was wrong. The scene then shifted to Louis, recalling a memory. He was in a snowy place with 3 young men. He had asked them to throw stones at him. They hesitated, thinking it was far too dangerous, clearly impressed and worried about Louis's safety. But the silver-haired boy reassured them it was fine. He was only running a test. In the end, they threw the stones, expecting Louis to dodge them all. As the stones flew toward him, Louis watched them with sharp focus. In his previous life, he had formed a hypothesis. He trained himself to transmit information rapidly from the parietal lobe to the brain. After calculating the trajectories of incoming attacks, if he could react instantaneously, he believed he could deal with any kind of assault. He calculated and then avoided being hit. His companions were astonished, calling Louis incredible. He merely sighed, knowing that the test still carried risks. The others asked how he had done it, wondering if it was a new technique. They were fascinated. Louis explained that he called it void combat calculation. The 3 boys had no idea what that really meant. Louis believed that the outcome of a battle could be predicted through technique. As the slimes charged at him, he performed countless calculations in an instant, proving himself a genius, practically the Einstein of martial arts. He knew that slimes possessed both speed and power, but they could only move in straight lines. By calculating the angle and velocity of their bounces, he could predict their attack trajectories. He began to move. Before everyone's eyes, he demonstrated how easy it was to dodge their attacks. After dodging 4 times, he earned 8 points. Then it was his turn. He drew his sword and sliced through 3 slimes at once, a technique he called sword cleave. Kane witnessed it and could hardly believe his eyes. The supervisors of the second exam began to suspect that Louis was reading the slime's movements, displaying absurd perception. Kane smiled as he watched Louis. He believed he was witnessing a practitioner of special combat techniques. His desire to team up with Louis grew stronger by the second. Suddenly, Louis noticed another slime rushing toward him. 5 more points guaranteed. He prepared to strike, but Kane used a sword-piercing technique, skewering the slime as if it were a chicken heart, headed straight for the grill. Louis did not like the blonde guy stealing his points. Kane denied stealing from Louis, instead pointing his sword toward other candidates and claiming he was taking points from them. He introduced himself properly and asked whether Louis would like to steal points together. Kane explained that he simply wanted to rank well, and since they were already there, he wanted to compete with Louis to see who could earn more points. He challenged Louis to show his full strength. Seeing how confident Kane was in his abilities, Louis agreed. He proposed a condition. The loser would have to do whatever the winner ordered. He asked Kane what he thought of that. Since Kane had made the demands, he accepted. The 2 began hunting slimes together. Other candidates groaned in despair, especially those who had picked fights with Louis earlier. They had been acting under Sheath's orders, but with the chaos caused by Louis and Kane working side by side, everything became much harder. Suddenly, a slime slipped past them. They tried to intercept it as it headed toward both Louis and Kane. Louis reacted instantly and cut the slime in half, but he did not expect arrows to follow right after. He collided with Kane, who had no idea what was happening. The trash archer thought he had hit Louis, but the silver-haired boy wore a grin. At the very last second, Louis caught all 3 arrows with his bare hand The lackey of Sheath stood frozen in shock. Catching arrows bare-handed was an utterly abnormal reaction. Kane hurried to check if Louis was alright, furious that those cowards were fighting dirty. Louis brushed it off. It was nothing. The shameless archer grew angry at being called trash by Kane and activated his double arrow skill, firing again at Kane. Kane easily deflected the attacks, but one arrow slipped through and blood splattered. Louis injured his hand while protecting Kane, gripping the arrow with his own flesh. Kane panicked when he saw the condition of Louis' hand. Louis, however, was unfazed. He knew the true target had always been himself. One of the supervisors clearly noticed the malicious intent behind the attack and asked Director Aronian whether those candidates should be disqualified. Aronian refused. In his view, those boys were destined to lose anyway. There was no need to intervene. He ordered the supervisors to prepare healing potions, as they would deal with the consequences after the exam. Louis then asked Kane if he had ever heard of baseball. Taking his stance with the sword, Louis knocked one slime into another, sending it flying toward him. He grinned. He was enjoying himself. With a powerful swing, he struck the slime. The impact was enormous, and the creature let out a pitiful cry as it was launched straight toward the three archers who were nothing but trash. The one who had drawn blood from Louis was hit with such force that he flew several meters through the air, exiting the field and being immediately disqualified. He crashed to the ground like a fallen fruit, clutching his chest where a massive bruise had formed. Kane saw it as a game, one that he found interesting. At that moment, Louis started running. The other archers who were still standing were worried about their little partner who had just been disqualified, but even so, they were furious about what Louis had caused. Then one of them realized that Louis had disappeared, only to be caught off guard. Louis had leapt into the air, kicking the slime like a soccer ball straight at one of the archers, smashing it right into his face. The archer went flying and was disqualified. In the end, only one of those stupid archers was left. Obviously, he was still holding his button. Louis appeared behind him and whispered in his ear that he was the last one, as if that human trash of an archer didn't already know. The little noble wanted the mere plebeian to step away from him, but Kane stuck out his foot and sent that damn brat tumbling out of the field. Kane even warned the idiot to be more careful next time. After that, he thanked Louis for what he had done earlier, but he really wanted to know if Louis' hand was okay. Louis confirmed it was. He also told Kane that he was a decent guy for a noble. After all, he was used to all nobles being terrible people. Kane thought he shouldn't be lumped in with the other nobles, and asked whether Louis had ever heard of the Great Families, since he belonged to one of them, the Aranka family. The Great Families are clans that have produced many great masters and sages. Their influence is immensely powerful, rivaling even the royal family, the nobility, and the arcane association. In the end, Louis thought there were all kinds of nobles. The other candidates who were still participating began to complain, because a poor nobody was interfering with their exam. They didn't want Louis to score more points. Suddenly, everyone started shouting that plebeians should disappear. They simply hated the poor. However, there were those who sucked up to Kane, and they were willing to help him, since they thought he was the target, unlike Louis. As a result, the fight became completely chaotic. Louis saw that a terrible mess had formed and warned Kane to stay alert. Kane made it clear that he wouldn't let his guard down again. Meanwhile, a pink-haired girl thought the exam was getting interesting. She was accompanied by a blue-haired girl named Miliana. Then she started running and called Miliana, saying they should make the nobles who had looked down on her regret it. Louis realized that many people were trying to get in his way, so scoring more points would be quite difficult. Suddenly, more slimes appeared. Miliana knocked one of the candidates down, while her friend threw several of them out of the field. The fight was intense, and a red-haired guy kind of like Gara stood watching with a hammer in his hands. He started laughing, finding all of it wonderful, because he thought punching people was more fun than hitting slimes. Then he began spinning his hammer like a top. He was going absolutely berserk. In this way, he went around smashing everyone with his hammer, throwing several candidates out of the field all at once. The supervisors wanted to know from the director whether they should stop the exam, but Aronian thought it was fine. A bit of youthful energy wouldn't hurt the second exam. One of the director's subordinates thought that if all the nobles were disqualified, it could be a problem for the academy. But in any case, the one who made the rules was the director himself, so he simply didn't care about public opinion. Suddenly, he went to the field and announced to all the candidates that the second exam was over. He informed them that the scores and rankings of the successful candidates would be announced shortly. Suddenly, all the candidates were surprised. The effect of the earth magic had vanished, and they felt immediate relief. Aronian asked the injured candidates to drink the potion they were offering, as it would restore their health. Louis drank the potion, and was quite surprised at how a magic potion worked. After all, he was poor and didn't even have 3 silver coins to try one. It was a very expensive item for him. Kane asked what was wrong, and also made it clear to Louis that if he won, he wouldn't keep bothering him. Quickly, Aronian revealed the rankings of the second exam candidates. Some nobles found it funny because they didn't see Louis' name on the list. The plebeian was really annoying those fussy nobles. Then the director of Kandria Academy revealed that the top 5 candidates this time had surpassed previous records. 5th place went to Miliana Royce. 4th place went to Kane Aranka. 3rd place went to Faye Durahan, Miliana's friend. But Kane was deaf. He didn't hear his name being called and began to believe he had been disqualified because of those little shits. Then Aronian announced that 2nd place went to Louis Kirill himself, with 887 points. Kane was quite shocked by that result. He immediately started pestering Louis after hearing it, also remembering that Louis had won their bet. He wanted to know what Louis would order him to do. However, the silver-haired guy said he would tell him after the exam. The glorious 1st place went to Neil Gunn, the firehead. The guy had scored 888 points, literally 1 point more than Louis. He thought there was an interesting bunch there, and hoped he wouldn't be disappointed. The other candidates were surprised, because Neil was huge. He really was a very strong guy. Miliana then called out to Faye. Noticing her friend was trembling, Faye admitted she would love to have a battle against Louis. Finally, the scene shifts to Sheath, who was quite disappointed, because the guys who had been following his orders had lost to the plebeian, which made him very angry. He pointed at everyone, declaring that they were a disgrace to the nobility, and then began lecturing them. After that, the scene shifts to the subordinate speaking to her boss, saying that plebeians taking 1st and 2nd place was something unprecedented since the founding of the academy. And there was more. Neil and Louis were boys who had come from an orphanage. Aronian quickly made it clear to her that the Arcane Association ran orphanages because true strength had no social status. Soon, he declared that everyone who had passed the 2nd exam should proceed to the next location. Seeing how close Louis had come to 1st place, Kane began to wonder who was stronger between Louis and Neil, something Louis himself still didn't know the answer to. Then the scene shifts to the 3rd training ground of the Kandria Arcane Academy. The 3rd exam was the final one, a survival test, a battle royale of emblems. Emblems would be distributed to all participants, and the veterans would use magic to teleport the participants to somewhere within the forest. It was completely random. Everyone's objective was to collect as many emblems as possible. Any method was allowed. Candidates who lost their emblem would be immediately disqualified. Only the top 10, based on the final emblem count, would be admitted. Kane soon warned Louis that for a while, they would act separately. He believed both of them would be targets, so he asked Louis to be careful. In the end, Louis would do his best to survive. Louis thought that in any case, announcing him as 2nd place had been meant to create exactly that kind of situation. The academy director wanted everyone to demonstrate their abilities to the fullest and survive until the end. As he walked through the forest, Louis reflected that admission was only 1 step away, so he didn't care. He wanted to win no matter what. Suddenly, one of the candidates appeared with an axe in hand, already looking for Louis, clearly furious because Louis was humiliating the nobles, when in truth he was just giving them payback. As the director himself had said, strength had no social status. To make matters worse, the big guy with the axe wasn't the only one. After Louis, 2 more had appeared. They thought everything was far too easy, since Kane wasn't there to protect Louis, as if Louis really needed that noble. In the end, there was also an archer up in a tree. Louis thought the teleportation team must have leaked his location. The situation had turned sour. The axe-wielding guy no longer wanted to talk, and charged at him with everything he had. He tore a chunk out of the ground, but failed to hit Louis. As the silver-haired boy dodged easily, the spearman declared that Louis wouldn't escape so easily. Louis made a huge leap, managing to defend himself against those attacks, but he was caught off guard. Some kind of energy tried to strike him from above. He shattered it with his sword, having no idea what it even was. The axe-wielder promised that Louis would lose his life right there. At that moment, Louis managed to evade the attacks of several men at once, until he saw that same attack coming at him again. He blocked it with his sword, while a spearman tried to strike him. The spearman warned that wind arrows were heading toward Louis, but seeing how Louis handled things, he realized Louis was a plebeian who didn't know how to use magic. Louis kept dodging, which made the man furious. Louis wasn't liking it at all. He couldn't calculate magical trajectories like that, so he came to the conclusion that he should use a counterattack called Sen no Sen, striking before they attacked him. Basically, Louis would use the enemy's power against themselves. At that moment, the candidates were ready to attack Louis all at once. Louis thought there couldn't be a more perfect moment. The axe wielder thought he had finally caught him, but Louis dodged easily and quickly forced the big guy to drop his axe. The axe ended up striking another candidate straight in the eye. Without wasting time, Louis dodged a spearman's attack, but at that same moment, the archer fired an arrow. Louis pulled the spear out of the man's hands, and at that moment, the spearman was hit by the arrow. Louis then grabbed the spear, looked toward the archer, and struck him with everything he had. In this way, he swept through all his opponents there, taking all of their emblems. One of the men became furious, saying that Louis should be hit with full power magic. Kane found it amusing, because there was no chance those guys could do that anymore. He was holding a crossbow. Suddenly, a man fell from a tree. Kane revealed himself on top of the tree, showing that he had knocked the opponent down with the crossbow. It was truly a shame those guys couldn't do anything anymore. They didn't understand why Kane was there, since some people had been keeping him occupied. Kane then revealed that he had made their comrades confess the entire plan, making it clear that he would never be fooled by idiots. Their mistake had been underestimating his family. The man became extremely enraged. He was so angry that if he strained any harder, he might actually crap himself. Kane thought the man was making too much noise and threw the crossbow at his face. Then he climbed down from the tree. Louis saw that Kane was fine. Kane explained that those were low-level nobles. They had only learned magic and nothing beyond that. They weren't big fish. Then he handed Louis one of the emblems the crossbow guy had been carrying. Kane also acknowledged that if things stayed like that, Louis wouldn't have any peace, so he offered his help. Louis refused. He wanted to collect his emblems on his own. At that moment, Faye appeared, clapping her hands because she found the whole performance truly impressive. She was very direct, revealing that Louis was the guy she had been looking for. She wanted to fight him. Kane knew who she was and explained to Louis that she was the daughter of a Grand Master. Louis asked if she was Kane's friend and whether he had already fought her. Kane looked a bit awkward, clarifying that Faye, muscular as she was not his friend. However, he revealed that he had fought her before. Back then, he had been unlucky because he let his guard down. Faye wanted the two of them to stop flirting, saying she thought they were cowards. In any case, she wanted to know why the two of them weren't fighting each other. Kane quickly gave Louis a tip, revealing that Faye could already use magic and that her skill level was that of an apprentice. In the end, it would be better for Louis to ignore her and collect emblems. Faye didn't like that at all. She felt it was cowardly, as if they were trying to run away. Louis pointed his sword at her, saying that he wanted to see how a great family fought. Faye immediately got excited, revealing that she fought without magic. She quickly rushed toward Louis. He paid close attention as she tried to strike him with everything she had, using her spear, but he managed to trap the spear under his arm. She thought he had defended himself very well. Then she made something piercing extend from her spear. Louis noticed it and quickly let go of the weapon. Faye still wanted to continue. She leapt and struck the ground, creating a crater. The supervisors watched from afar. They found the spear techniques of Faye's family, the Durahan family, amazing, with incredible speed as well. However, they were also surprised by Louis since he was a mere plebeian and was holding out for quite a while against her. After all, she had resources he never had, so the difference in level between them was glaring. Those subordinates believed Louis would lose soon. The director was also present, and one of the subordinates wanted to know who the academy director thought would win. Aronian revealed that he actually liked Louis, but that he couldn't defeat Faye. The subordinates didn't understand why Louis wouldn't be able to win that battle. Aronian believed that the fight was a clash of body and will. Then the scene shifts as dust rises. Suddenly Faye emerged from the dust, bloodshot eyes blazing, trying to hit Louis by any means necessary. He dodged all of her attacks without the slightest difficulty, which made Faye extremely irritated. It was at that moment that Louis found an opening. He avoided her blows, which were very fast, and then leapt. Faye made it clear that she couldn't believe Louis had been able to dodge all of her attacks, since Kane hadn't been able to. Louis told her plainly that it wasn't difficult at all. Everything that had to be done was to observe carefully. Seeing that, Faye decided to try another technique, called Crescent. Louis saw it, and knew that spear techniques had several movements, such as thrusts, sweeps, defense, and suppression. Combined with the spear's reach, it was very problematic. At the same time, he believed there were several fatal weaknesses. At that moment, Faye began spinning her spear, while Louis realized that one of the fatal weaknesses was vulnerability at close range. In other words, if he struck at the right moment and instantly closed the distance, he could counterattack. Thus, he used a technique called sword dance. Faye knew what he was trying to do, but said it wouldn't work on her. She quickly began to spin, and Louis couldn't understand what was happening. Faye declared that the Durhan family's spear had no weaknesses, so he should prepare himself. She was essentially creating a whirlwind. The supervisors saw that Faye was pure talent, though it wasn't exclusive to her. Her entire family was extremely talented. Still, they acknowledged Louis' worth since he was pushing himself hard. Louis continued trying to endure, aware that another weakness was that spear techniques consumed a great deal of energy, so he persisted in defending with precision, believing that at some point an opening would appear. The moment Faye stopped spinning, Louis saw his chance and tried to strike her with everything he had. However, his sword ended up breaking. She was surprised, because if that hadn't happened, he would have been able to counterattack. Seeing this, Louis thought his luck was terrible. His opponent began to believe he was holding back, which she didn't like at all, but that was one of Louis's habits. He liked to observe first, to decide whether he should go all out. In any case, he revealed that he would take it seriously. Faye didn't understand since his weapon had broken. It was at that moment that Louis revealed that he was actually better with his own fists. Then they resumed fighting. Without wasting time, Faye used one of her techniques and charged toward Louis. Watching the fight, Kane warned Louis that the technique was the spinning charge. If he were hit, he would be severely injured. At that moment, Louis began making hand movements, and his energy intertwined with Faye's technique, leaving Kane wide-mouthed. Faye was completely confused, because to her it was impossible. Louis had stopped her technique with his bare hands. At that moment, even the supervisors couldn't understand what Louis had just done. The director began to reflect. Faye thought it still wasn't over, so she kicked her own spear, catching it again, and revealed she had another trick to show. She placed the spear behind her back, and quickly began moving at incredible speed. Then she tried to strike him again, but suddenly Louis made the same hand movements and blocked her attack once more, leaving her utterly confused. The academy director saw that Louis had stopped the spear's rotation with a special technique, something he had never seen before, and thought the silver-haired boy was astonishing. One of the subordinates couldn't imagine that a plebeian could fight against the dragon family's technique. Faye was sent flying several meters after Louis' defense. She was extremely surprised and wanted to know what that strange technique was that Louis was using. Louis explained that it was a type of martial arts defense defense, where he matched his movements to the spear's motion, canceling out the applied force. Faye didn't understand any of it at all. While Louis was willing to show her more, moving toward her before she could strike him, he dodged as she tried to hit him in every possible way. He had practically passed beyond the reach of her spear. Kane thought he was seeing some kind of optical illusion. The movements of Louis and Faye were like a butterfly. Faye was becoming completely impatient, since her opponent was right in front of her and she couldn't hit him at all. It was an elegant step, created by a legendary boxer, moving the feet quickly back and forth, commonly known as the butterfly step. It was basically light movement with a rhythm difficult to follow, making it perfect for that situation. Then Louis quickly sent Faye flying again with the impact. Kane couldn't believe he was seeing Faye being thrown back by Louis. The director admitted that it was completely unexpected, seeing that even in a battle without magic there were few who could defeat Faye. The supervisors began to think that Louis was a genius in close quarters combat. Faye declared that the battle wasn't over yet, showing that she was truly a very strong woman. After all, she came from an excellent family, so she couldn't lose easily. Louis couldn't help but notice that she had abandoned her spear, so he believed she would use spear-based martial arts. Faye went absolutely berserk, trying to pound Louis with her fists. He moved quickly. She tried to land a crushing punch on him. He managed to block it, but the impact was enormous. The impact ended up injuring his hand. Even so, he praised her technique, while Faye clarified that the Durihan family wasn't just about spears. She then showed another technique with her fists, while Louis continued using boxing techniques. The battle became extremely intense. He was very happy to fight a strong opponent. With all his heart, this was a dream he had always hoped would come true. He wanted more and more of it. His heart began to beat faster and faster. At that moment, the gleam in his eyes changed. He leapt, wanting to see how she would react. Faye didn't understand what the hell was happening, because Louis had completely changed. It was as if she were seeing a demon coming toward her. Her body couldn't move, so all she could do was try to defend herself, but the impact was so absurd that it sent her flying while she spat blood. The director was utterly shocked. Faye flew until she hit a tree and fell to the ground. Some candidates watched in disbelief that a plebeian had done that to Faye. Then one of them, named Brian, suddenly began to feel sick. He started to panic and vomited abruptly. He had no idea what was happening. He only told his comrade that he felt unwell. That sensation was coming from Louis. Louis had truly become a threat to the nobles. They believed he had to be eliminated by any means, seeing that his aura was completely different. If the legend was true, they could not let Louis remain alive. With that, Louis moved toward Faye. She was extremely frightened, already badly injured, and even so, he struck her with full force, sending her flying once again and making her spit out a large amount of blood. While she was still in the air, he chased after her, intending to strike her again. He landed several punches on her. Faye realized that his power and speed had changed. They were on an entirely different level. She believed she could no longer defeat Louis at that moment. To make matters worse, given how things were, she thought she would end up being killed by him, so she decided to use arcane martial arts, trying to create a clash between his strike and hers in an attempt to defend herself somehow. But it was useless. The impact was absurd, sending her flying once again, tearing through trees as if she were a walking lumberjack. Suddenly, Louis returned to normal. Realizing what had happened again, he looked at his fist and saw that it was magic. Kane arrived, wanting to know if Louis was alright. Louis was fine, but he wanted to know about Faye. Then Sheath appeared, declaring that Louis had lost his emblem and was therefore disqualified. At that moment, Louis saw his emblem drifting away. The veteran declared that Louis had to leave immediately, but Kane stepped in to defend him, making it clear that everything had been an accident. Sheath could not believe that Kane was planning to help a commoner. He went up to Louis and told him to leave at once, since he was disrupting the exam, calling Louis trash that needed to be discarded. However, Faye shouted, asking everyone to wait a moment, drawing everyone's attention. Louis was surprised that Faye was not in pieces. She could still walk. Sheath wanted to know if she was trying to protect Louis, warning that she could be disqualified for breaking the rules. But Faye, covered in injuries, did not want to listen to a lunatic talking nonsense, so she told him to shut up. She knew that Louis's emblem had burned, and she apologized to Louis, explaining that she had accidentally used magic. Kane could not believe he was witnessing Faye apologize. However, Louis disagreed, saying that he had entered a rage mode. Faye thought it was fine anyway, since he had made her use magic. He had effectively won. She hoped they could have another match when they were enrolled at Candria Academy. The veteran thought it would be impossible for them to enroll, stating that he had 4 emblems. At that moment, Faye took her emblem and handed it to Louis as a reward for defeating her. Louis now had 14 emblems, wrapped in a cloth. Faye then informed the veteran that Louis's emblem had burned after he knocked her down, so it should count as a valid record. Sheath grew furious at her words. Suddenly, Faye, who was a bit crazy, smacked Kane on the shoulder a few times, calling him handsome. He had no idea what was going on. Faye then turned her back on them, stating that she would not accept weak people passing while those who deserved it were left behind. She kicked her spear, sending it flying into the air, and caught it mid-air, making it clear that only 10 people could pass in total. She then asked what would happen to Louis if the 10th place holder had 14 emblems or more. Kane thought it was a coincidence, because he had been thinking the same thing. He did not expect Faye to think about anything other than fighting. Faye got angry, realizing he was calling her stupid, so both of them left to collect more emblems. Louis watched them with a smile. Suddenly, the supervisor appeared beside Louis and Sheath, informing Louis that he had lost his emblem and was therefore disqualified, and that he would be escorted out by the silver-haired man. Louis simply accepted that fact, but Sheath made it clear that things were not over. His colleague Brian said that if Faye defeated other candidates, Louis would end up passing. Still, Sheath never wanted to see Louis's face again. He began to wonder whether it would really be so strange if a candidate died in an accident during the exam. Brian liked what Sheath was saying, hoping that Sheath would not be weak like the others. Brian kept thinking about the strange feeling he had felt earlier about Louis, and wondered about his true identity. Soon after Louis left with the supervisor, he knew that martial arts were certainly strong, but on their own they did not compare to magic. He thought that if he could learn at that school how to fuse magic and martial arts, he could become very strong. As he walked, he disliked the fact that his clothes were ruined. At that moment, a hooded man passed by him. Louis did not know how he could explain this to his mother. If he told her the truth, she would worry and ask many questions. Suddenly, the man tried to attack him from behind, but Louis was alert. He kicked the mysterious man's weapon away, sending him flying several meters. The hooded man wanted to know how Louis had noticed. Louis explained that the smell of blood is not something that can be hidden. The hooded man, who had companions, thought Louis was far too calm for someone who was about to lose his life. Louis realized those men were skilled, so he would have to give it everything he had, especially one man he noticed hiding behind the trees. He believed that one was particularly dangerous. The hooded man drew Louis's attention back to him, declaring that Louis's head would roll. Louis dodged all of the hooded man's attacks, found an opening, and quickly slammed him to the ground. But the man was no pushover. He tried to attack again as he was getting back up, and Louis managed to dodge once more. The hooded man regained his stance and realized that Louis had superhuman perception and advanced combat techniques, just as the intelligence had said. Louis was confused by what the man meant. The hooded man admitted that Louis's hand-to-hand combat could rival that of an apprentice, but he wanted to see how Louis would handle magic. At that moment, other hooded figures appeared and began firing spells in his direction. Louis managed to get rid of those arrows, which pierced through trees and left huge holes behind. He grew irritated when he realized they were wind arrows again, so he decided to use breathing techniques, channeling the chi within his body to increase his physical strength. He unleashed even more of his body's latent abilities, explosively boosting his power and speed. Focusing on that, he swiftly charged toward those men. The hooded figures kept firing at him. To them, Louis was struggling in a completely pointless way, but Louis calmly dodged every shot. That was when the crossbowmen realized just how fast he was. Suddenly he vanished from their field of vision. He had leapt, grabbing one of their crossbows. In an instant, he kicked one of them away. The others, who still had their crossbows, began firing again, and the hooded leader ordered them to stop Louis. Suddenly, another hooded man appeared, attempting to kick Louis from above. Louis managed to block the attack, though he felt a massive impact on his arm. He was surprised by that man, realizing he was very strong. Like the others, he was hooded, but he was much taller and far more muscular. Louis kept dodging the incoming shots until at some point he grew exhausted and fell to the ground. The crossbowmen trembled from the strain, relieved that the silver-haired boy had finally fallen. They were tired from firing so much. One of them began to suspect that Louis was no mere commoner, since he was far more troublesome than an ordinary apprentice. Suddenly, Louis noticed their movements. He sprang up with incredible speed, seized that man's crossbow, lowered it, and struck him straight in the neck. With just his fingers, he nearly shattered one of the man's vertebrae, making him bleed profusely. Holding the opponent's body, he fired at the other hooded figures, but the big man managed to block the attack as if it were nothing. He had not believed that Louis was playing dead. Louis was weakened, but still capable of fighting. The big man clapped, remarking how impressive it was for someone so young. After all, Louis was only 13 years old. Louis noticed that despite his subordinates being dead, the man did not care at all. He treated them like trash. With that, Louis charged straight at him. The man dodged easily, just as Louis himself did. He said that Louis was a very clever kid, and if not for the orders he had received from a certain person, he would have liked to take Louis as his disciple. He then used a kind of weapon, a dark hammer, as if it were conjured, and struck Louis, sending him flying high into the air. The man was extremely fast, however, and managed to keep up with Louis, positioning himself right in front of him. The big man said that Louis possessed abilities that could surpass those of an apprentice, but against a higher-ranked fighter, Louis did not even come close. He struck the silver-haired boy again, slamming him hard into the ground. The impact was tremendous, yet the fighter did not give up. When the dust finally settled, he saw that Louis was still alive, but his bones were completely damaged. Louis made it clear to his opponent that he would not die there. His opponent replied coldly that Louis's life would end there no matter what, guaranteeing that not even a god could save him. At that moment, he began preparing a magical attack, making Louis's eyes widen. He was using an arcane martial technique called the Celestial Hammer, but Louis refused to die there. He wanted to master magic and protect his precious family. He wanted to change his destiny, no matter the price he had to pay. Once again, rage mode emerged. Louis was desperate to survive. A massive energy burst from his fist, blocking his opponent's attack. The big man could not understand what the hell had just happened. Suddenly, a gigantic explosion erupted. Louis coughed heavily. The fighter found it strange. He felt as if he were fighting someone of the same rank as himself. The power Louis had just displayed made him fully understand why he had received the order to kill him. He concluded that Louis was a monster and had to die before it was too late. Suddenly, someone shouted that things had gone too far, launching an enormous strike at Louis's opponent. The man tried to dodge, but the attack split into three and began chasing him. He grew terrified, trying to understand what it was. In the next instant, he was struck by multiple slashes at once, taking the full force of the technique. Louis himself had no idea what was happening. The one who had arrived was Director Aronian. He had stopped the fight. Louis could not understand why the director was there. Aronian saw that the boy had managed to suppress his rage, but for now, all Louis needed to do was drink the magical potion the director gave him. Aronian surveyed the area as Louis's opponent collapsed lifelessly to the ground. The director would not tolerate a criminal attacking a candidate of his academy. He demanded to know who had given the order. The hooded man declared that the director should not think he could protect that monster. Suddenly the man went slightly mad, making it clear that this was only the beginning. Then he exploded out of nowhere, creating a gruesome bloodbath at the scene. Aronian did not understand at first, believing it to be the work of the Assassin's Guild. The fighter had erased his own existence to prevent information from being leaked. Aronian hoped he was wrong. Louis realized how incredible the potion was. It was an advanced healing potion. Even his fractured bones had been completely restored. He then believed that the director had not appeared by coincidence. He wanted to know why Aronian was always saving him. The director, however, was very straightforward with the boy, saying they would discuss it at Louis's house, catching him completely off guard. That was when Louis realized it was very late, and that his mother must be extremely worried. He immediately started running faster than Sonic, knowing things could get very bad for him if he didn't hurry. At that point, the director called Kylie, ordering him to take care of the cleanup. Meanwhile, still in the city of Mantia, some nobles were arguing with Louis's mother because she had repaired the grinding machine, something they found very strange. They also believed the woman had imposed that on them, and thought she assumed everything was fine just because she had the church's support. They grabbed the poor woman by the arm as she explained that she was actually just waiting for a child there. However, one of those human pieces of trash looked at her with a psychopathic stare, making it clear that she should not lie to them, claiming that she needed to be punished. Suddenly Louis's foot slammed into that idiot's face, knocking out several of his teeth. The kick was perfect, like something straight out of the Champions League, sending the man crashing into his companion. Lucilla was overjoyed to see that Louis had finally come back home, but she was utterly shocked when she looked at her son. Louis asked if his mother was all right, but she paid no attention to his question. Instead, she demanded to know what had happened to him. His clothes were completely ruined, and there was dried blood on his body. At that moment, Louis said that everything was fine, explaining that his clothes had only been slightly damaged during the exams. Then the noble realized it was Louis again, declaring that he was always breaking the rules, and wondering how Louis dared to fight a lord. He thought he should call the fighter George again, and report the matter to his superior. But at that moment, the director arrived, making it clear that there had been a misunderstanding. He introduced himself as the director of Candria's Arcane Academy, stating his name. The worthless nobles immediately began to tremble when they saw that the director was flying, proof that he was a true grandmaster. Aronian told those human pieces of trash that he would be sending his regards to their lord. The two scoundrels quickly bowed before the academy director, making it clear they understood perfectly. The director then asked to confirm whether Laciella was Louis's mother. He knew it was sudden, but there was something he wanted to discuss. Laciella invited him into their house and asked him to sit for a while. Aronian noticed the strange mill the nobles had mentioned. The mill was moving automatically without magic. Looking closely, the director thought he had seen it everywhere. Louis adjusted it, and soon after, Laciella arrived with a tray of fruit, saying she had no idea how Louis had thought of that, but that it had made life much easier for her and Julian. Still, she wanted to know whether the boy had caused trouble during the exam. After all, the director was in their home. Director Aronian explained that Louis had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, he had shown results beyond his imagination, making it clear that he possessed a talent Aronian had only seen in the scriptures of Gaia. Back when humanity was under the tyrannical rule of monsters, a genius arose among mankind. Guided by the goddess, he understood the essence of the elements and created martial arts. 5 years later, on a certain day, together with his companions, he defeated the monsters and saved humanity from extinction. The commemorative day when the sacred calendar was born later came to be known as Liberation Day. In the scriptures of Gaia, that man was called the first hero. Laciella knew of the true savior, while Louis was confused. Until then, popular legends spoke of no hero who had saved humanity. The director explained to the boy that the hero appeared in a different form. He was a man with black hair and black eyes, which took both Laciella and Louis by surprise. The director revealed that this was the great secret, known only to the upper echelons of humanity. The hero had indeed saved humanity, but the madness that dwelled in his heart eventually killed everyone. He committed a grave, unforgivable sin. As a result, that episode was erased from human history. It was a kind of inner madness, like a curse. Louis looked at his hands, thinking about that inner madness, wondering if it came from that era. The director also explained that this was why, in every country, when someone with black hair and black eyes was found, it was considered best to eliminate that person quickly. Aronian then asked whether Louis truly thought he could keep deceiving everyone just by using hair dye. Laciella immediately panicked, explaining that she was the one who had told Louis to dye his hair. She was not trying to hide anything. She simply feared that something terrible might happen to him, and was only trying to protect her son, insisting that he was a good boy. Louis quickly tried to calm his mother, telling her that everything was fine. fine. If the director had wanted to kill him, he would have done so already. Thus, Louis believed the director was there for another reason. Aronian thought the boy was very wise for someone only 13 years old. Not only was Louis resisting the inner madness, what the director referred to as rage mode, but Aronian also saw the great qualities of a new hero in him. Louis was left confused after hearing that. Aronian explained that although the world seemed peaceful, beneath the surface there was a great darkness lurking. While observing Louis, he suddenly thought that his potential was absurd. Because of that, the director of Candria Academy was willing to guide the boy onto the right path for the future of humanity. He casually tossed the fruit in his hand toward Louis, who caught it with style. Aronian also informed him that thanks to Kane's and Faye's efforts, most candidates had failed the final exam. As a result, Louis had passed. The director then welcomed Louis to Candria's Arcane Academy and asked whether the boy would like to receive his personal instruction. Louis felt that Aronian was betting on him, but he wanted to know what the director would do if he ever went mad. At that moment, the director's gaze changed completely. In mere seconds, he sliced the fruit in Louis's hand, leaving the boy stunned. Aronian revealed that if that ever happened, he would kill Louis, making the atmosphere heavy. The scene then shifted to the next day. In the morning, one of Louis's friends was shocked to learn that his friend had received a personal invitation from the director of Candria Academy. Still, Louis felt that this was not the only reason the director had gone to his house. In the end, the director had given him a warning the previous day. While Louis's friend was already calculating all the expenses Louis would have to bear, Louis wondered what his connection to the legendary hero truly was. He remembered the moment when the director had said he was fooling no one with dyed hair, and that if he ever completely lost control, he would be killed by the director's own hands. He did not know how much he should trust the director's words. The scene then returned to the previous day, after their conversation, when Louis remarked that the director should not have said those things in front of his mother, since it would make her very anxious. But Aronian believed that if Laciella knew nothing, she would eventually become a burden. Louis did not like hearing that at all. Aronian warned the boy that once his true identity was revealed, his family would also be in danger. Since she was his mother, she should understand the situation to some extent. He then warned Louis that he needed to become stronger, because the real trials were only just beginning. In the end, Louis knew the director was right. He truly needed to grow stronger. Soon after, some children ran after Louis, calling him brother, and he hugged one of the little girls named Lana. Lana was worried and wanted to know if he would ever come back home someday, because she didn't want to say goodbye to him. Louis made it very clear to her that he would return during long breaks, since his true home was there, so they simply made a pinky promise, as he didn't want the little girl to worry. Shortly after, a young man informed Louis that a noble's butler was calling for him. Louis then went to the butler. At that moment, the elegant butler confirmed Louis's name, informing him that he was the butler of the Aranka family, and that he was there to invite Louis to visit the Aranka mansion. It was an invitation from Kane. Louis thought Kane probably wanted to strengthen their friendship before classes began, so he accepted without any problem. The butler asked him to get into the carriage. Then the scene shifts to the Candria Empire, in Harzan, where the butler told Louis that the Aranka family was incredible, even making the city of Harzan prosper simply by being nearby. When Louis saw the gigantic mansion, he was quite surprised. Soon, Kane appeared to greet Louis, reminding him that they had become classmates. Louis commented that he had heard Kane caused a huge commotion during the final exam. Louis was also aware that he had passed only because of Kane and Faye, so he was willing to let the bet they had made slide. Kane, however, thought that was a matter for another time, stating that Louis had the ability to pass anyway, especially since he had Faye's seal of approval. The fact was that Louis had credibility with the best students and even with the director. Kane still hadn't had the opportunity to fight his classmate. They hadn't fought during the exam, so he wanted Louis to be his opponent before classes began. In any case, Kane believed Louis was curious to learn more about Candria Academy. They entered the mansion, and soon a woman who looked quite cranky wanted to know what all the commotion was about, and who the person beside Kane was. The unpleasant woman was Kane's mother. Kane explained that Louis was his friend, but she barely let her son speak, shouting and ordering him to be silent immediately. Kane was caught off guard by his mother's reaction, as she reminded him that she had already spoken to him about choosing his friends very carefully, since the gates of the Aranka family were not open to just anyone. She also believed Louis was not worthy of being her son's friend, thinking that associating with Louis would be a waste of time. She warned that all Kane should do was train, as his father had said, so that he could become a sage. After scolding Kane, she asked Louis what he wanted by getting close to her son, believing he was an opportunist seeking money or power. She quickly showed a ring worth dozens of gold coins, declaring that she could buy Louis's life with it. If he didn't understand her point, she wanted him to take the ring and leave immediately. Kane didn't like at all what his mother had just done to his friend, and apologized to Louis. However, Louis reacted very differently. He took the ring and told his friend's mother that he had become friends with Kane because he recognized Kane's ability. Then he asked whether she really thought her own son's word was worth so little. Kane was truly surprised. The woman became deeply irritated and ordered someone to expel the plebeian from her house. Several guards quickly appeared. Kane asked his mother to wait a moment, explaining that Louis had more talent than he did, that Louis had broken records in the exam and had even defeated Faye. Kane's mother didn't believe that a commoner could surpass children from wealthy families, so she thought her son was lying. Kane insisted it wasn't a lie. Louis assured Kane's mother that if they joined forces, both of them would become stronger. Kane's mother grew nervous and shouted at Louis, thinking he was extremely arrogant and mocking her family. Suddenly the door opened, and a man declared that if Louis stayed nearby, Kane would indeed become stronger. He wanted confirmation that what he had heard was true. That man was the master of the house. Kane's mother became a little nervous in his presence, and rushed toward him, explaining that if Kane continued at that pace associating with commoners, he would never surpass the master of the house. But the master simply walked past her and completely ignored her, showing that she was irritating and best avoided. That man was Kane's father. Kane immediately bowed when he saw him. Louis greeted his friend's father, introducing himself and stating his name. Louis felt an incredible aura, something very similar to the director's level, emanating from Kane's father. At that moment, Kane's father wanted to know if Louis' words were true, and Kane informed him that Louis' abilities were better than his own. Kane's father then asked Louis to prove it. That man was William Aranka, the head of the Aranka family. Louis felt an overwhelming killing intent coming from William. It was so strong that he felt as if he were being bitten by a massive beast. He could barely breathe. He realized William truly intended to kill him. The pressure was absurd. William's willpower was terrifying to Louis, affecting his soul in a way he had never felt before. Still, that was more than expected from a Grand Master. However, because Louis had continuously hunted monsters over the past few years, he had developed resistance to killing intent. If it was only at that level, he could endure it. He began to release his own power. William saw this and was confused. Louis's eyes completely changed. Their intents clashed, but William's impact on Louis was brutal. Kane grew worried about his friend. Louis dropped to his knees, and Kane rushed to support him, asking if he was okay. William then wanted to confirm whether the boy's name was Louis Kirill, and asked why Louis was seeking strength. Louis answered directly, explaining that he wanted to protect his family. William then turned his back and told his son that his willpower was very weak, and that he had much to learn from Louis. Kane's mother became worried, and called out to William, displeased with his decision. William, with an icy demeanor, asked whether she had an opinion. She quickly denied it, and simply accepted his decision. At that moment, Kane called Louis, so they could go to the training field. The scene then shifts to the Aranka family's training grounds, where Kane apologized for what had happened inside the house, stating that his parents were not easy to deal with. Louis was calm. He only thought Kane's father was a bit extreme. In any case, there wasn't really a difference between him and Kane, so everything was fine. Kane explained to Louis that his father was a meritocrat, so being recognized by him was difficult. In the end, Louis seemed more suitable to be part of the Aranka family than Kane himself. Louis believed that William had tested his abilities because of Kane, and so he thought that was William's way of showing love. Kane began to think about what his friend had just said. He clearly remembered that he had almost never left that house since he was little. Looking back, all that came to Kane's mind were memories of eating, sleeping, and training. His father's wish was to raise him to become a great sage, just as his grandfather had been. Without understanding why, Kane simply kept swinging his sword as he had been told. Perhaps he only wanted his father to acknowledge him, but Kane felt that the place was like a prison. It seemed that even breathing required the guard's permission. The adults around him praised him as the young master all the time. He didn't care about those things. His status and talent were nothing but chains to him. The more they restrained him, the stronger his longing for the outside world became. Kane wanted to sing freely like a bard, like a bird flying across the continent. Unfortunately, he lived in a world where strength mattered. He acknowledged that he was still quite weak, but it wasn't that he wanted to be strong for its own sake. Swinging his sword was simply the only way he had found to break those chains. His father William was also a graduate of the academy, so Kane wanted to enter the academy and grow stronger. He wanted permission to live freely, and in any case he was counting on Louis. Louis affirmed this, showing that he was there to support him. Soon they began to train. William observed the two of them, and asked whether the butler had the results of the investigations. The butler informed his master that Louis was definitely not an ordinary boy, because according to the intelligence gathered, he had used a series of combat techniques that had never been seen before. Not only had he broken previous records, but he had also defeated Faye, who used magic. The butler also informed William that Louis had quickly earned the respect of the Candria Academy's director, who apparently had even fought against the Assassin Guild the day before to protect Louis. William began to think that the boy training with his son was a serious troublemaker. The butler then wanted to understand why William had allowed Louis to have contact with his son. William explained to his butler that troublemakers tend to attract danger, and challenges are meant to be overcome. That is how people grow. He believed that Louis was truly capable of making his son stronger. At that moment, Kane used a technique, while Louis asked his friend to use all the power he had. William began to think that his son had a good eye for recognizing capable people, something he truly hadn't expected. Kane then used a skill called Wind Thrust, charging toward Louis. The silver-haired boy quickly read the move, attempting to punch Kane right in the face while simultaneously dodging the attack. Louis then told his friend that accelerating with magic was good, but he felt Kane's movements became too linear. Kane was surprised that even while using magic, Louis managed to counterattack so easily. That was when he understood why Faye had been unable to defeat Louis. At that moment, Louis grew thoughtful and asked Kane whether he had felt anything strange about his own fighting style. Kane didn't understand, since his techniques were secret arts passed down through the Aranka family. His father and grandfather had mastered them and become strong. However, Lewis was trying to tell his friend that there was another path. Kane was surprised that Lewis was suggesting something different from what his father and grandfather had taught. Louis then picked up a sword and asked whether Kane didn't want to surprise his father. At that moment, William was watching and soon realized that something was wrong as the two boys headed in his direction. Louis explains that in martial arts, speed is an absolute weapon. Speed doesn't only mean movement speed, but also reaction time and quick decision making. He says that his current speed pairs well with wind attribute support magic. Not to mention that dual wielding techniques are inherently difficult to master. He explains that just because his grandfather mastered them doesn't mean he can't do the same, and perhaps the reason his father stopped at the grandmaster level was because of that. However, Louis says that to maximize his talent, he needs to switch to a specialized combat style. He takes a fighting stance and asks if he's prepared for it. Kane tells him not to lump him together with spoiled noble brats. He would do anything to become free. Louis thinks that was well said, since the key to fighting is to keep moving, retreat when necessary, and show his father their skill and determination. The two of them quickly rush toward Kane's father, while the blonde uses wind magic to accelerate himself. The butler tries to stop them, but the father tells him to leave it to him, and easily dodges the attack. Louis advances and attacks in various ways, but Kane's father effortlessly avoids every move. Louis thinks that daggers are faster and more maneuverable weapons, and he plans to exploit their advantages to the fullest, combining them with his own combat techniques, martial arts, butterfly step. He intends to surpass his opponent's reaction speed and unleash maximum attack power within minimal space. He begins attacking in every possible way, but the Grandmaster dodges them all. Meanwhile, Kane activates his wind magic and charges in as well. Now the Grand Duke is dodging both of them at the same time. Kane is surprised by how light the daggers are. It's much easier for him to use them, and it feels as if he's flying like a bird. He uses one of his wind abilities, infused into the daggers, and strikes at the Grandmaster, declaring that this is his martial path. But just as he's about to reach him, the Grandmaster uses one of his skills and easily repels Kane. He grows furious that his son abandoned the clan's techniques and asks if this is meant to prove his own will. Even so, the two continue attacking. Kane uses wind acceleration to propel Louis forward along with him, and they strike simultaneously at great speed. The Grandmaster blocks both attacks and asks Kane if that's all he has. He calls his son a coward and moves to attack him. Kane remembers Louis saying that retreating isn't weakness, it can help set up another strike. Kane dodges his father's punch from above, and Louis arrives just in time to attack together with him. Kane recalls their earlier conversation, when Louis mentioned a baseball technique called change of pace, and he attacks with his dagger, telling him to try blocking it. Louis explains that, simply put, it's a technique that deceives opponents through variations in speed. Even casual movements become feints if used properly. If the opponent's reaction is delayed even for an instant, he can dominate by maximizing the dagger's strength through speed. They continue attacking together. Kane moves in again, and the Grandmaster says such a slow attack is meaningless. But suddenly, Kane increases his speed and slices a lock of his father's hair, leaving the old man surprised. Louis even feels proud of that. They attack again, but the Grandmaster says that's enough. He tells Kane not to disgrace the Aranka family name. As he leaves, the butler asks what that was all about. The Grandmaster reflects that they used consecutive close-range dagger attacks, hit-and-run tactics, and feints through speed variation. These were new possibilities. He can't believe he might actually learn something from children. Louis says it was a good opportunity to train with a Grandmaster, but Kane says his father acknowledged him for the first time. It was the best feeling he had ever experienced. He wants to give Louis a gift. Shortly after, in the Aranka family library, Louis is impressed by the space. Kane shows him something, saying it's his way of thanking Louis. Without him, he wouldn't have found his path so quickly. It's a box containing books, gold, and scrolls. Kane explains that they aren't just books about Kandria's Arcanist Academy, but also rare magic texts that ordinary people seldom see, which will help him improve. There are basic magic theories and mana attribute theory, but the curriculum is essentially divided between magic and martial arts, and all students must undergo the magical awakening ritual. Louis doesn't understand, so Kane explains that it's a ritual where you sense the elements through Gaia's statue. Kane says he already participated at the church temple, but even his family had to pay 100 gold coins for it. Louis says he can't afford that. 100 gold coins could help the orphanage, and there are academy expenses too. But Kane says it's free if done at the academy, and that's one of the main reasons people enroll. He adds that tuition and book rental fees can be paid with credits. In any case, he asks Louis to accept it. Before Kane forgets, he remembers the promise they made and asks if this makes things fair. Louis says yes, though he thinks he needs to earn money. He remembers Julian saying that magical pharmacists can earn well. He comes up with an idea. He could invent things using knowledge from his past life and make money that way. Louis asks Kane whether the Aranka family has connections with the Merchants Guild. Kane asks why, but Louis says it's a secret. He'll find out eventually. A week passes, and the students are leaving the entrance ceremony. Louis is excited that the day has finally come. A girl approaches him, surprised by his scent, asking if it's a newly released cologne, and assuming he must be some rich boy. She introduces herself as Rose from Class 150, congratulates him, and asks if he'd like her to show him around the academy. He agrees, saying it would help a lot. She asks him to follow her but thinks she's never heard of a Kirill. Perhaps he's an illegitimate noble child. She begins explaining that since the emperor has grown old, the imperial heirs have been fighting with nobles and great families within the academy. Thanks to the headmaster's efforts, the academy is peaceful on the surface, but behind the scenes, there's fierce competition for educational resources. Some students can progress smoothly by passing classes and earning credits, but if someone becomes a target and fails to earn credits, they could be expelled. She says he's one of those being watched, and tells him to do his best. She asks about his family and whom they support. Suddenly, a guy appears, saying he must be the commoner freshman who broke the entrance exam record. He introduces himself as Brian. The girl is shocked to learn he's a commoner, and leaves, thinking it's a waste of time. The blonde guy tells him not to mind her. He explains that the academy is like a miniature version of the Empire, and there will always be people like her. As a commoner, he'll have a tough life. Then Kane appears, calling out to Louis. Brian quickly says goodbye, saying he'll go see the other students, and to call him if he needs help, though he doesn't look happy about Kane's presence. Kane asks what they were talking about, but Louis says it was just greetings. Kane explains that Brian is the rector's son, though they're not close. Faye and Miliana appear, saying he's at least a decent guy, and she doesn't like men with weak wills like him. Kane feels offended, thinking she meant him too. Faye says that if he's as strong as Louis, she might acknowledge him. Louis thanks her for helping during the exam. She says it was nothing, but next time she'll beat him. Kane complains about being ignored, but Miliana pulls her away to finish the ceremony. Kane hands Louis the gold coins, saying it's his share and to follow his instructions. Soon after, Louis presents perfumes he developed. The subtle aroma sets them apart from ordinary ones. Kane says they smell good, but isn't sure they'll make a profit. Louis tells him not to be pessimistic. Back in the present, Kane says he never thought they would cost that much, but he'll give some to his mother. Louis asks him to keep it between them. As they head to the freshman reception, an instructor hands Louis a credit card and tells him not to lose it, hoping he'll use it well. Everyone is talking about the commoner who passed, saying it's a disgrace the academy allowed it. They even heard someone was expelled because of him. Louis asks if Sheath was expelled. Kane says he hired the Assassin's Guild to target him. They found out and expelled him. However, Sheath has an older brother named Jess, and there's no telling what he might do, so Louis should stay alert. In the main hall, the director welcomes the new students, telling them to be proud of passing, but this is only the beginning. They must continue studying and become truly powerful, and one day become pillars of the Empire. He introduces the freshman representative, Neil Gunn. The guy walks out completely naked, just as he was born. Everyone wonders what he's doing, and whether he's the commoner who defeated the first-place student in the exam. One instructor tries to stop him, but the director prevents it. Neil grabs everyone's attention and declares that his goal is to defeat every single one of them until they wet themselves in fear. Everyone is furious, asking who this bastard thinks he is. Neil tells them to shut up, since all they know how to do is shout. He grins and says his main target is Louis. Then he hurls his hammer toward him, climbs onto its handle mid-flight, and orders Louis to fight him. Kane steps in between them, saying the ceremony is still ongoing, and telling Neil to stay away from Louis. Neil looks surprised and asks if Louis is really hanging around with an idiot like him, someone who only barks and doesn't bite. Kane is furious at that, and moves in to throw a punch, but Louis stops him, telling him to calm down. Neil says he doesn't care, they can both come at him if they want. Just then, Brian arrives, saying the two of them are the most talented commoners here, and for Neil's own good, he should try to get along with others. If he keeps acting like this, he won't last long at the academy. Neil ignores him, and tells him to get lost. He's not interested in small fry. Brian is furious, and everyone is shocked by the way Neil spoke to him. Kane tells Brian that some people only learn the hard way. Neil grins and says that's perfect. He'll crush him first. An instructor suddenly appears, stating that fights between students are forbidden. Combat is only allowed during classes, exams, or tournaments, and a professor must be present. If anyone breaks this rule, they will be expelled. He asks Neil if he understands. Neil says yes. Getting expelled would be a huge problem, and then walks away, but not before telling Louis to wait for him. The instructor announces that the entrance ceremony is concluded and that they're free for the rest of the day. Classes begin tomorrow and they are not to be late. Louis doesn't understand why Neil picked a fight with him. Kane says it's because of the muscular girl. Just then she appears, saying they were almost expelled and it was partly her fault. She fought Neil during the final exam, and due to the time limit, they ended in a draw. But he heard rumors that she lost to Louis, and that's when it all started. She says she's relieved things didn't get worse and would have felt bad if he'd been expelled. Kane tells them to leave. It seems they're already quite hated around here. Cut to a local shop. Louis complains that everything is expensive, but the saleswoman insists it isn't. The feather pillow costs only 30 silver coins, a bargain, and the magical herb pillow costs just 5 gold coins. Kane says that's still cheap and decides to buy the items. Now Louis can see how important money and credit are. Kane chooses the cheapest starter kit for 100 silver coins. Louis feels relieved that he made money earlier from the perfumes, and plans to send the rest to the orphanage. Thai appears saying they should head to the dormitory since the awakening ritual is tomorrow. Louis practically drools, seeing the girls' fancy suitcases, and says he needs to work hard. At the dormitory, Louis hopes he won't be stuck with a delinquent roommate. Suddenly, a mattress is thrown out of a room, and a boy is being threatened by a few others. A blonde guy angrily asks if he's looking for trouble. Louis steps in and uses his ability, causing pain in the bully's arm. Louis reminds them that duels are forbidden. The bullies argue they haven't done anything. One of them charges at Louis, claiming Louis threw the first punch, so it's self-defense. Louis blocks with just his arm, causing the strike to rebound into one of the bully's friends. The guy starts crying, asking why he did that. Louis uses his ability again, this time on the attacker's leg, making him kick another friend in the groin. He has no idea what's happening. Louis punches him in the stomach, making him stumble and fall onto his other friend, which enrages him. He accuses Louis, saying it's all his fault. Louis replies that he shouldn't blame his own body for acting strangely. The guy calls him a monster, and Louis seems offended, giving him a serious look. As Louis approaches, the boy who is being bullied stops him. Louis says that if everyone finds out they're fighting here, they'll all be in trouble. If they have complaints, they should speak to the director. The bullies flee in fear. Louis introduces himself as his roommate and asks his name, but the boy ignores him. Louis sees the name Candace, but the boy says nothing and enters the room. Louis thinks he might just be shy, and clearly the type who gets bullied. Reflecting on everything that happened in just one day, Louis hopes tomorrow will be normal. The scene shifts to the academy grounds. Louis is impressed and wonders if the statue represents the goddess of this world. One of the priests tells them to behold the great creator, Goddess Gaia. Long ago, Goddess Gaia created a world where humans and monsters could coexist. But over time, monsters unleashed their overwhelming natural power. Dragons ruled the skies, behemoths the land, and krakens the seas. Their brutal struggle for dominance bathed the world in blood, and countless humans died. Enraged, Goddess Gaia granted her blessing to humanity, which had no magic. Humans came to understand the essence of water, earth, wind, and fire. From that, they created martial arts. After countless battles, they escaped annihilation and became the rulers of the world. The priest says they will now receive that blessing and awaken to the essence of the world, the power of magic. Louis notices there's no mention of the first hero the director spoke of earlier. A priest guides Louis and Kara to a spot and tells him to sit. If he has talent for magic, he'll be able to feel the elements. If he's trash, who can't feel even that, the academy won't need him anymore. The priest announces the ritual will begin and instructs everyone to sit. Louis wonders if the priest hates him. The priest explains that the 4 elements are the foundation of the world, and under the goddess's blessing, they must sharpen their minds. He begins praying, and a brilliant light surrounds him. The elements gather at the staff of Gaia's statue. The statue glows intensely, and a massive aura appears before the students' eyes. Everyone is stunned, asking if that's an element. Students begin receiving fire and water elements. Neil suddenly manifests a massive fire vortex that surrounds him. Everyone is shocked despite being a commoner. He awakened 2 attributes. They wonder how he can control magic so easily. Even Neil is excited, saying this is what he wanted. Whatever this power is, it will obey him. He looks at Louis and says, someone who hasn't even awakened a single element can't be his rival. He tells Louis not to disappoint him. The other students are shocked. Louis hasn't awakened anything. Louis wonders why he can't feel anything. Is it because he's not originally from this world? He rejects that thought. He felt something when fighting alongside Kane before. He could vaguely sense a strange power, but now it feels as if his mind is being suffocated by something hazy. He refuses to let his will be restrained so easily, and a massive explosion erupts within him. All the students turn to look at Louis. He notices 4 colors of light and wonders if those are the elements. The priest thinks he created a magic circle to prevent Louis's mind from entering that space, and doesn't understand how he can still see. When Louis tries to touch an element, it slips away. He can sense them, but why can't he grasp them? Louis desperately tries to seize the sphere of energy. The priest thinks he's arrogant for believing he can escape mental isolation alone. He should be finished by now. It's explained that the mana circle blocks the flow between spirit and element. The orb beneath him is a magical item that weakens the bond between people and the elements. There are those determined to crush Louis at any cost. The priest says if Louis wants to blame someone, he should blame himself for making too many enemies. Since he accepted this little gift, he cannot give up now. The priest tells him to wait until the ritual ends. Soon after, as the other students leave the temple, some boys comment that Louis and Kara kept trying pointlessly. The only one worth watching is Neil. Kara notices something suspicious beneath Louis and points to the ground where he had been sitting. It's a trap. Louis stands and slams his fist into the ground, cracking it open. He finds a glowing purple orb. Kara tells him that's the item preventing him from sensing the elements and urges him to remove it quickly. Louis thanks him. He doesn't understand why something like this was there. Could it really be a coincidence? Then he remembers the priest. Louis begins concentrating, saying now it will truly begin. Multiple elements start gathering around him. The other students are stunned. The vortex looks very similar to Neil's. details. They can't understand what's happening with these commoners. The priest was shocked, wondering how he had awakened. Not even a grandmaster should have been able to break the confinement circle, but soon the director appeared, telling him to stay quiet. Everyone wondered why the director was there, perhaps to inspect that commoner, but he had been having difficulty awakening, which was strange. The priest thought this was terrible. He couldn't understand why the director had shown up. Their plan had almost been exposed. He went to a fountain where a man was sitting and said they had failed. He added that he didn't want any trouble and asked him to stay away for a while. The man at the fountain thought the useless commoner had been very lucky so far. The director ordered someone to keep an eye on the priest who had just left and said they couldn't lose sight of him. He mentioned that he had removed the obstacles. Now it all depended on the boy. Louis was still in deep concentration. He found himself in a space where he was floating and wondered if this was what Cain had talked about before. He had a flashback of asking Cain what the elements were, and Cain replied that they were the foundation of this world created by the goddess. Louis had asked why monsters could use magic from birth, while humans needed to receive a blessing. Cain explained that monsters possess magic crystals inside their bodies. These crystals contain various elemental powers, giving monsters a high affinity for elements from birth and allowing them to use magic through their magic crystals. Humans, on the other hand, must undergo an awakening ritual. After being acknowledged by one of the elements, they still cannot use magic unless they manipulate the elements around them. During the ritual, elements with good compatibility would approach them. Once Louis was recognized by the elements, all that would remain would be training his mind and body. When Louis asked if magic crystals were the elements themselves, Cain said that everything in this world was made of elements. Back in the present, Louis wondered if the water attribute was compatible with him, but when he touched the element, he felt a malicious presence within it, causing a sharp pain in his head. The power around him began to destabilize. The director noticed that the essence of the world was manifesting by the will of the goddess. He found it troubling, as it was becoming highly unstable. He opened a barrier called Seal, creating a cube around Louis to prevent the aura from spreading through the temple. No one understood what had just happened, the violent wave of magic, and why the director had isolated Louis inside. The director tried to speak to him, asking him to calm down and not let himself be influenced. Louis began to hear the voice, but his eyes and hair started turning black again. He felt relieved, as he had almost lost his rationality for a moment. Observing the elements closely, he noticed they resembled elementary particles. The elements began to stir within his orb, and the four elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, appeared in his hands. Outside, the cube began to emit a powerful glow. A strong vortex formed around it, astonishing the other students who had never seen anything like it before. His aura was terrifying, even more than Neil. The director smiled, saying he had been waiting for this. Louis had exceeded his expectations. Louis realized that the essence of magic was the same as that of elementals. Thinking scientifically, he concluded that humans could potentially use magic more easily than monsters. He gathered magic in his hands and around his body. He remarked that the elements were in constant motion within him, and by harmonizing that movement with the flow of ki and his breathing, the circulation became smoother. He might even be able to create a magic crystal within his own body and use magic as a qigong technique. He concentrated magic in his mind. When he opened his eyes, several pillars of ice formed around him, amid fierce winds, and a colorful light emanated once again. Louis began to float, delighting the director. As he floated, the students tried to flee from the expanding ice, but it eventually froze them all. The director realized this was not good, and that he needed to suppress the power. He prayed for the goddess to hear him, and grant him the power of flame. He then used a barrier of fire, melting the frozen students, and a massive pillar of fire rose outside the temple, astonishing all the academy's professors who sensed the immense magical power. When Louis descended, the director asked what kind of element that was, as it resembled ice. Louis replied that the elements were moving at high speed and seemed to be merging. He thought that depending on the combination, a chemical reaction could occur and create a new element. The wind and water elements, when mixed, completely filled his meridians and energy pathways. He wondered what he should do and felt he needed to talk to someone about it. He snapped back to awareness and saw the director standing in front of him. The director dispersed all the magic around Louis and asked if he understood what he had just done. Louis saw the students lying on the ground, thawed by the flames, and admitted it seemed he had messed up and that the director had saved him. The director communicated with someone, saying he would return to his office, and asked Louis to follow him, as he must have questions as well. In the director's office, he first congratulated Louis on his awakening. If his senses were correct, Louis had awakened all four attributes. Louis confirmed this, and his hair turned white again as he displayed the elements in his palm. The director said that handling the elements so smoothly meant he was a prodigy. He could hardly believe Louis was a newly awakened apprentice. His talent was genuine. He gave Louis a book he used himself, saying it should help him study magic and serve as a reference. The director explained that he only used wind and earth, so for fire and water, Louis should seek guidance from Faye and Miliana. Both came from great families and knew him, making them ideal teachers. The director then called in his assistant Kylie, introducing her as his trusted aide. From now on, she would protect Louis. However, Kylie asked the director if they could move to another location. Louis asked where they were now, and the director explained that it was his training and meditation chamber, with walls reinforced by earth magic. The assistant asked if Louis could show the ice element he had used. Louis explained that he had discovered discovered it by accident during the awakening ritual. By accelerating the movement of two elements and mixing them, a new element was born. He had named it the ice element. The director said he had never heard of such an element, and even the assistant was surprised. She smiled and advanced toward Lewis, saying she wanted to feel it too. She began attacking him repeatedly, but he defended himself easily. When he attempted a decisive strike, she quickly retreated. She wondered if his movements had become faster, but in fact, she had slowed down. Her arm had been frozen. She asked whether fusing two elements had ever been accomplished in history. The director replied that it had not. Since magic first appeared, countless geniuses had studied it and devoted their lives to it, yet no one had ever succeeded in fusing elements. It was explained that only a few people could control more than one element. Even the Empire's saint, Lady Miriam, the only genius of the Eastern region, managed to control only 3 elements. She had also attempted fusion, but failed. Her mind and body could not keep up. Louis asked whether ordinary humans simply could not withstand attribute fusion. The director explained that for humans to wield magic, they must endure the power of the elements with both body and mind. When accelerating their movement as Louis had done, tremendous willpower is required to guide and release them outside the body. If he tried to guide several out at once, they would collide with each other and kill him instantly. In short, Louis's potential could rival that of a saint. Kylie begins to concentrate her power and attacks once more. As the two of them exchange blows, the director says that Miriam had formed a hypothesis on how to handle multiple elements at once. To achieve this, one would need a body similar to a dragon's capable of withstanding the collision of elements, or use magic through magical crystals, just like monsters do. While defending himself, Louis asks about the research results. The director replies that they were disastrous. All the experiments conducted within the Empire failed, and eventually the entire concept was deemed forbidden. He never imagined that anyone would even attempt to break that taboo. Louis reflects on this, realizing that he had just prevented the elements from colliding. The girl tells him not to get distracted, and attacks with a kick, asking if he understands what this means. He says yes, that it could become a source of trouble for him in the future. Kylie warns him that if his secret leaks, there's no telling what might happen to him. The director had told her to protect him, but she doesn't like trouble, and asks him not to do anything unnecessary. Louis says he understands, and that he will tell everyone he awakened to the water attribute, and that the ice element is merely an application of it. He explains that his willpower is stronger than most people's, and asks Kylie to attack him again. As soon as she does, Louis begins compressing his water power, and then launches it toward her, leaving both the girl and the director shocked. He had used the water element in a supersonic ice form. Confused, the girl asks how he turned ordinary water into ice that doesn't even melt under external flames. He explains that liquids have the property of changing form under intense pressure, and he simply applied several concepts he had in his mind. The director is delighted, commenting that there are many things without explanation that even he doesn't understand. He tells Louis that he may come see him anytime, and he will teach him how to use his power properly. Kylie asks if he truly intends to protect the boy, since what just happened could have been a coincidence. The director responds that some things written in books are also said to be products of coincidence, and he doesn't want to deny any possibility. Kylie says she understands, and that she will protect him properly, then leaves. The director says classes will begin tomorrow, and that Louis should head back. He hands him a recovery potion. On his way back to the dormitory, Louis doesn't even feel sleepy, and thinks the potions are truly amazing. He notices the boy from earlier, and asks why Kara is still awake, and whether he was waiting for him. Either way, Louis thanks him for saving him, and asks how he noticed the artifact. The boy doesn't answer, only handing him a card from the Candace Trading Company. Louis immediately understands how he figured it out. He says that since the boy helped him, he might also become a target for troublesome people, but the boy simply leaves after thanking him. Louis thinks that if he really is the son of a merchant, he could be of great help in the future. The next day in the training hall, a blonde man introduces himself as Professor Derek, their physical training instructor. Under his guidance, everyone would develop perfect bodies. No one seems interested and thinks he might be crazy. Louis, however, disagrees, commenting that the professor isn't wrong. Body and mind are the foundation of martial arts. The professor quickly approaches Louis and Kane and starts feeling Louis's body, saying that every part of him, from head to toe, is extremely well trained, a masterpiece. He says he loves students who train hard. Louis feels disgusted. The professor then turns to Kane, disappointed that he lacks muscle. Before beginning, he says they will follow tradition. The seniors will demonstrate how to use the equipment. The seniors approach, saying they lost to ordinary people, not just wealthy families, and they will show the difference between apprentices and real fighters. The instructor tells them to begin. The first senior demonstrates the arm and chest training equipment. Each weight is enhanced with earth magic and weighs 1 ton, and he lifts them easily, astonishing the newcomers. A girl begins spinning on another piece of equipment, while another student runs on a treadmill with weights attached to his feet. Then the professor says it's the newcomers' turn. When they try, everyone struggles and can't last long on any of the equipment. The seniors mock them, calling them spoiled, but when they see Louis, they are stunned. He is lifting 10 tons. He also runs at high speed on the treadmill, and when he tries the spinning device, he spins so fast that he creates a tornado. They find it unbelievable, and there's no magical potion that could make this easier. Neil is also giving it his all. Neil carries 10 tons on each arm while running on the treadmill, and declares that this time he beat Louis. He suggests using this to determine who truly stands at the top. But Louis says that today's class is only basic training to build their bodies, nothing more. Showing off strength is pointless. One of the seniors becomes angry, thinking Louis is talking about him, and asks what their attributes are. Neil says he has dual attributes, leaving the seniors shocked that a commoner could achieve that. When asked about Louis's attribute, he replies that it is only water. The senior bursts into laughter, saying that out of the 4 he got the worst one. He even mocks him, asking if he plans to hit people with a puddle of water. Louis doesn't understand what's wrong. A girl explains that the water attribute only has the water blade as an offensive skill and is more suited for defense and support. The senior adds that no matter how strong someone is, once they awaken water, their future is ruined. He tells Louis to behave and just support his teammates. Louis asks if he truly believes that. The senior says it's common sense. Commoners really know nothing. The other 3 try to intervene, but soon both groups end up in a heated argument. The senior says they came to instruct the newcomers to handle magic properly. One must toughen the body, and endurance training is perfect for that. By deliberately taking hits, you increase both mana control and physical resistance. He proposes a friendly match and says he will show Louis how useless the water attribute is. Kane explains to Louis that the senior is Sheath's older brother, the one he mentioned before, and that water isn't good for protection. He warns that the senior might intend to kill him, but Louis says he doesn't believe that and accepts the challenge. He will fight the seniors and prove he is right. The instructor states that magic may only be used in the central area, and that dodging attacks is strictly forbidden if they want to demonstrate their strength. Neil laughs, excited for a fair fight. The senior says he'll deal with the water brat first, and then teach him a lesson. The senior uses earth magic to cover his body with armor and charges at Louis, but Neil intervenes and punches him. The senior doesn't understand how his supposedly tougher attribute armor shattered. Another senior orders everyone to attack Neil together, but Neil blocks all the blows with just his arms. He grabs one of them by the leg and throws him at his companion, knocking both down. The armored senior tries to attack Neil from behind and lands a direct hit, but the armor on his hands shatters, and he screams in pain. His hand is broken. Neil had covered his neck with earth magic. The senior is shocked at how Neil managed to focus magic on a single point. Neil then sends him flying out of the arena. The professor reminds them not to forget the basics, unless they want to end up like him. Louis wonders if things aren't going too far, but 2 seniors try to attack him at the same time. Faye and Kane defend Louis using their wind and fire attributes. Louis stares at the remaining senior and says it's time for the main event, and the senior says that Louis is arrogant and that he will teach him what dignity and noble pride truly mean. He quickly charges at Louis and unleashes his wind magic toward him. However, Louis manages to defend himself using his ice magic. The senior is shocked as the wind begins to dissipate, and he quickly retreats, only to notice that his hand has been frozen. Louis says it is a water magic application technique he developed. The girl who is fighting another senior is surprised, and all the students are astonished, saying they have never heard of anything like that before. The senior thinks Brian was right. This year's freshmen are troublemakers. Meanwhile, Neil is easily knocking out another senior. One of them charges at Neil to attack him, and Neil asks if he will be his next punching bag. Neil tries to strike him but misses, which makes Neil furious. He begins launching multiple explosions across the arena to try to hit him. Kane kicks Neil in an attempt to calm him down. Neil attacks from above, shouting at his opponent to stop running like a coward and fight fairly. The impact shakes the arena, causing Louis to become distracted and fail to notice the senior approaching from behind. Louis remarks that the man speaks of pride and honor, yet all he has done so far is attack from behind. Neil attempts to strike while they are fighting, but Louis barely dodges Neil's fire attack. He realizes that facing 2 opponents at once will be difficult. The senior tries to attack from above again, but Neil intercepts him and sends him flying away, asking why he doesn't understand that teamwork is the best strategy. Neil then turns on Louis, saying there are no more distractions. The professor finds Neil's movements perfect. He is a true battle genius. However, Louis blocks every blow with ease. Having finally understood Neil's weakness, Louis strikes at his neck. Even with blood in his mouth, Neil quickly grabs Louis' hand and intensifies his flames, saying the fun is only just beginning. Louis replies that he cannot intentionally injure a fellow student, and by doing this, Neil has crossed the line. He uses his magic to dissipate Neil's fire. Neil comments on what the professor said and insists he will neither run nor hide, but Louis begins freezing him rapidly and asks if he prefers to do this the hard way. Neil smiles, saying the pain is unbearable, and increases his flames even further. He declares that by fighting Louis, he will surely become stronger and urges him to keep going. The scene shifts to a flashback of Neil. He wonders what pain truly is when suddenly a pack of wolves appears. One of them bites his arm and leg, but Neil pries the wolf's jaws open with his bare hands and tears it in half with his strength. He says that pain is proof that he is alive. Pain is is what makes him stronger. Only the strong can survive in this world, and that is why he wants to feel even more pain. He leaps toward Louis, declaring that they are the same monsters hungry for power. Louis makes a few swift arm movements and easily slams Neil to the ground. Before Neil can react, Louis kicks him in the face. Neil finds it exhilarating as Louis continues beating him in every possible way. Kane asks Faye if they should let this continue, warning that at this rate Neil might die. Faye replies that letting Neil do whatever he wants is also bad, and they will stop him together later. Neil charges again, shouting that he is not finished. Louis wonders how he can deal with this guy without breaking the school's rules, and thinks freezing him might be the best option. He lands a direct punch to Neil's stomach, forcing him to calm down, then sends him flying away with his ice magic. Neil truly feels pain, but he melts the ice with his fire magic and grows even stronger. The professor thinks this is becoming even more interesting. Crouched down, Neil says he will not give up so easily. This is nowhere near enough to make him quit, and asks Louis to continue the fight. Suddenly, someone interrupts the battle by slamming Neil's face into the ground. Louis notices it is Kylie. She explains that he has gone too far, even calling him thick-headed. The muscular professor suddenly acts shy when he sees Kylie. He says it has been a while since he saw her, and that she looks more attractive than ever. He tries to touch her to feel her power, but she stops him, asking what he would do if someone died on the first day of class. She asks if he has forgotten what the director told him. He says that really hurts, and comments that he is not a brainless idiot. He was only trying to draw out their potential, but Kylie replies that she did not expect him to truly be just an idiot. She reminds him that she was told to protect Louis, and asks if he understands what that means. She adds that the director told him to report to his office later. He knows he will receive another scolding. Still, he wonders just how strong these boys might become. The professor orders Neil to get dressed and says he will only say this once. If he loses control again, he will lose his credits. Neil thinks he cannot withstand Louis's attacks, and at this rate he will run out of money the way he keeps tearing his clothes. He might have to hunt monsters for cash. The bell rings. The professor says that is all for today, and tells the freshmen to rest. From now on, training will be even harsher, and they are not allowed to cry. Kane tells Louis that it has been over 100 years since the academy was founded, and asks if a freshman has ever defeated a senior before. He says it has happened only 3 times, and each time great masters emerged from that class. The most recent was when their parents enrolled. Back then, defeating a senior was rare. Elsewhere, another senior apologizes to Jess, saying those freshmen are too strong, and that they could handle them from the shadows. Jess says he did well. Those two are monsters, and there is no need to rush, since there will be many opportunities. Whether they are talented or not, they still control the empire, and can shape their fate. The scene shifts to Faye. She asks her friend what she thought of Louis' technique, since his talent for magic is insane, and staying near him might make her stronger. Her friend says she cannot do that, since no one has ever used such strange techniques before. She feels she needs to create more offensive techniques for the water attribute. Faye tells her to relax. She is only 16, but her friend insists she must work hard for her family's sake. Faye expected that answer, and decides to call Louis over, saying her friend wants to talk to him. Everyone assumes Miliana is about to confess to him. Louis approaches with Kane, and asks if she needs something. Faye then asks whether he could teach Miliana that water magic technique. Louis says yes, he does not mind, and they are friends. Miliana says that one day she might cause him trouble, and asks if he will not regret it, but Louis refuses, saying he would never think that way about his friends. Miliana replies that she does not want to drag him into her problems, and suddenly runs off. Faye apologizes to Louis, saying she will go talk to her for a while. Louis reflects that everyone has their own circumstances, but if that is the case, he might be the one who brings trouble to others. He directly asks Kane whether he knows anything about Miliana. Kane explains that she is the only daughter of the Royce family, and the granddaughter of a grandmaster. When her grandmother was alive, her family prospered, but after the old lady passed away, they apparently lost much of their influence. Kane admits he does not know much beyond that, and that Faye would probably know more if asked directly. Louis then asks Kara if he knows anything. Kara says the Royce family is in conflict with the association. Louis understands immediately. It must be related to the Arcanist Association, and asks if Kara knows anything else. Kara refuses to elaborate. Louis accepts that, and says they will need to ask Faye or Miliana herself for the details. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the first magic training field. The priest from before appears again, and tells everyone to listen. He declares that magic is the goddess's blessing, and the true essence of this world. In this class, he will teach them how to handle magic, and how to use martial arcana. He introduces himself as Sid. Kane asks Louis what is wrong with him, since he seems unusually excited for class. Louis says he is still excited, but feels like that professor hates him. The professor suddenly appears, telling them to be quiet because he is still speaking, and he hates having his class interrupted. He immediately deducts 1 credit from both Kane and Louis. He makes it clear that he is not like a certain muscular idiot, and if they continue breaking the rules, they will eventually reach 0 credits. As he turns to leave, he calls Louis arrogant and deducts another credit from him, saying he must learn proper noble etiquette and how to behave like a student. The professor then summons a giant armored statue, holding a spear and shield. Louis is surprised that it is earth magic. Sid explains that to unlock the full potential of martial arcana, one must first master both magic and martial arts. If they intend to become full-phase apprentices, they must first learn to manifest mana into a weapon. Once they master that, they can cover their bodies with arcane armor and become true fighters. He tells them to control their mana with their bodies, connect through their minds, and channel it through movement. With that, he launches an attack directly at the armored statue, saying that is martial arcana. Later, everyone will attack the stone statue in the same way, and the student who deals the most damage will receive 5 credits. Before that, he will teach them how to attack using magic. He tells them to form groups based on their attributes. Neil, who has dual attributes, does not need a group. Those with the water attribute are instructed to practice arcane armor and assist with warm-ups. Everyone mocks the 2 water users, calling them human punching bags. Miliana says they are stuck with support spells and will not even get the chance to attack the statue. At this rate, she will never become a grandmaster. She has to prove her strength to that person. Louis wonders who she is talking about, perhaps someone from the Arcanist Association, and asks if something is wrong. She says it is nothing and has nothing to do with him. Louis asks why she is so focused on attacking. Are support spells not enough? Interrupting enemy attacks and protecting allies are also important. She replies that she wants to become a grandmaster and restore the Royce family. To do that, she must be able to both attack and defend. She adds that the goddess would not create an incomplete attribute. There must be powerful offensive water spells as well. Believing that, she tried enhancing the power of the water blade with magical potions, and even developed multiple strike versions. But in the end, it still did not make up for the lack of raw power. She feels that perhaps water is not enough to become a grandmaster. Just then, a boy approaches, saying he wants to warm up, and asking her to use her water shield. As soon as she casts it, he attacks with wind magic, and she can barely withstand it. Watching this, Louis is reminded of his past life. Everyone mocked him for learning martial arts despite his fragile health. Glory did not suit a failure like him, they said. They told him to give up on his dreams and die. He realizes that Miliana knows her own weakness, yet she continues chasing her dreams without giving up. Perhaps he can show her a new path forward, just as he did with Cain. Louis steps forward and uses his ice magic to block the boy's attack. He says he also believes in the potential of water and asks Miliana if she will observe his technique. He then asks Sid if he may also attack the statue. The professor replies that if he fails to damage it, more credits will be deducted. He suggests Louis should quietly continue practicing mana control instead, and asks whether he plans to use ice magic. Louis says no, he will use water magic. The students laugh again, saying that with ice it might be possible, but with water it is impossible. Miliana explains that the statue is made of rare magical ores reinforced with earth magic. A normal water spell would not even scratch it. She asks what he will do if he loses his credits. Louis says that is nonsense. He has a plan. As he approaches the statue, he thinks that no one in this world knows this, but in his world, softness overcomes hardness. If he mixes a bit of sand with high-pressure water and fires it at great speed, it becomes a weapon capable of cutting anything. He concentrates his magic and launches his attack. The statue is sliced into multiple pieces. Everyone wonders what he just did. Such a weak stream should not have left even a mark, but as they look more closely, the statue begins to crack and collapse. Sid stands there in shock. Louis calmly says, "This is the power of water magic."